Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be discussing one new function that was introduced in the current release, that is the BuildRowSetFromJSON, and you might be seeing a lot of blogs and articles, even videos. So I am also taking the same path to just show a demo to how to build and use this particular function. So let's first understand what this particular function does. So it says it creates a row set from a JSON. Okay, so you have a JSON data, and what it does is it basically creates a row set for you, fine. And this function can return an empty row set on an error. So even let's say you have a function which is basically returning you error, it will not return you an error. You have an option where you can say even on errors, just send me the empty row set, right? And this is being said that you can use this function at the send time only. So inside the email, whenever you are performing the send, at that moment you can perform this action, okay? Or you can use code resource or cloud pages and all. There you can use this function, fine. And then we have the function properties. Inside the function property, the source JSON string to parse, that is the first parameter. So the first parameter you have to pass is the JSON string, okay? The second parameter is the JSON path argument, like from that particular JSON row set, or what you want to basically extract and then store it, fine. And the third one, which is a boolean, basically this one is the one which basically they are giving you an option, okay, whether you want to pass a value of 0 or 1, okay. If you say value of 1, then it can return you an empty row set. If you say 0, then a value of 0 does not return any empty row set, so it will throw an error. So if you have try and catch, obviously if you want to implement try and catch inside AMPscript, then you have to obviously leverage SSS, right? So that's the reason I believe they have given you an option with 0 and 1, either to return an empty row set or to throw an error, okay? And if you're throwing an error, make sure you're catching an exception and storing or handling the exception, right? Now with the usage, we'll go to the usage in a little while, okay? Before that, let's go to this row set content. So basically first you have to understand, whenever you're basically trying to parse a JSON, okay, you need to understand the format of the JSON. So here a typical JSON format where your every node is defined by the flights, okay, from where it originates, what is the destination, and what's the price. So this is the basic structure they have, right? And this flight details is basically an array, normal array, okay, array of objects. And here in the function, if they say this is my basic JSON, and from there go to the root folder, the root node, and from the root node go to the flights node, okay, and from the flights bring me everything there inside this particular flight object. So it will return all the array for that particular object flight, right? And then you'll get the row set which will have all these headers as origin, destination, price, and for baggage surcharge. So whatever attributes you have inside that array, okay, that particular object, it will be passing you this. But you also need to remember, let's say you have, like, you are not interested with all the properties values that you have inside this particular object, okay, you only want the price, okay. So if you say build row set from JSON and you give the source and then you parse it in this format, which is saying go to the root, extract the flights, all the flights, and give me only the price, right? So it basically, if you go back to definition, it says it returns you a row set. Now, if it's returning you a row set, it means it's just giving you the values and your header, okay? The property is the value. So you have to keep in mind, every time it is an array that you're receiving back, okay? And if it has the properties, all the properties, then all those properties will be defined. If not, like in this case, if we are just looking for the price values to be populated, then it will not come as a price, it will come as a value. So here in this example, they have clearly mentioned it, okay? And now we can go to this standard review, okay? If you click here, then this is the JSON path, and they are basically discussing this documentation, okay? You can go through this documentation, it's quite interesting. Yeah, and they will explain how they get inspired to build this one, okay? So it is from the XML format, XPath method. They have derived the same principle and have built the JSON path, okay? So, and they have also given, like, if you want to, how you can basically path the JSON path similar to the XPath. In the XPath, we have the slash, here we have the $, okay? So the notation might vary between XPath and JSON path. And here is the example they have given, okay? And then you can see what we can do is, first let's take this example. First this example, okay? With this, let's go to my block, and in this tab, the JSON path, you can basically paste that value, okay? This is the value. Here in the JSON path, let's change this. So we have flights, and we say flight is an array, okay? This is what we want, okay? And let's go down. So all the flight details, this is my evaluation results, see, okay? Now if you just want the price, then dot price, let's see, okay? So these are the price, it's coming as an array, okay? Now if you just want origin, let's go origin, and you see all the origins, all are this Indiana. And if you want to see the destination, then these are the destination, right? So this is how the path is defined, okay? You can also, obviously, you can copy this and then you can try with a cell, okay? And if you want to know more about the JSON path, obviously they have defined how the JSON path and everything can be defined. I can go through this and so demonstrate, but you can try it on your own. Today what we'll do, we will basically discuss our day-to-day use case. If I have to basically call the V2 token, okay, and do this BuildRowSetFromJSON function in an AMPscript. So what I'm going to do is I'm to call the REST API from Marketing Cloud. Sorry, the authentication API for Marketing Cloud to retrieve the V2 token, access token, okay, and I'll parse the access token and print the token. So I have explicitly said what are the prerequisites. You need to have the basic understanding of AMPscript syntax and functionalities, right? You need to have the access to the authentication API and the necessary credentials, right? Client ID and client secret. And you should have a basic understanding of AMPscript function, fine? So let me directly go to the code. So this is my code, okay? This part you can skip, but this is how you need to basically maintain your documentation when you're writing a code, fine? So these are the variables, and I have defined what this variable means, why I'm using this variable, and what is the purpose of those variables. Okay. So I have defined whatever variables is required. So I have the endpoint, payload, call status, response, client ID, client secret, data extension name, and all the stuffs. Let's move forward. So here we have basically defined the variables. Now here in the variable, I'm assigning those variables. Okay. So my content type will be application JSON. Okay. And I always postfix this one, char set, UTF-8. So any special characters would be properly encoded and return me without any issue. Okay. So I have a data extension called install package. And inside this data extension, I have stored my client ID, client secret, REST API, authentication API, and all other endpoint URLs into the data extension because I don't want to expose it to the outside environment. And this property is basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a function called lookup order rows. Okay. And there I'm basically looking through the API config property where the value is transaction API. And from that, I want to bring that particular row, okay, and fetch the client ID, client secret, and authentication API endpoint. So at line number 29, I did a lookup order row function. Okay, I passed the data extension name, the number of rows, which is basically 1. Okay, and if you give anything less than 0, it will return the maximum number of rows to be written if the condition satisfies. Okay, and I want to sort this particular row set based on the client ID descending, okay, and the client secret as a descending order. So I am also defining the order to how to basically sort this particular row set. Fine. And once it returns the row set, I'm validating whether that I'm getting a row set which has some values which is basically greater than 0. Okay. So if the row count is greater than 0, I'm going to parse this particular row set and fetch all those attribute values from the data extension. So I'm using a for loop for I equals to 1 to row count. Okay. And then I'm picking a particular row that is the first row. Okay. Though since I only have only one row, so obviously this loop is going to iterate only once. And then I'm fetching the authentication API endpoint, client ID, okay, and the client secret. And I'm assigning to these variables. Then what I'm going to do, this is only the authentication endpoint. Okay. So if you see this endpoint here, it will only send me up to this part, not the method. Okay. If you have confusion, you can go back to my previous videos where I was discussing modular coding with SHS. You will see the data extension structures and what is being discussed there. Fine. So I had one lookup order rules, and then I fetch the client ID, secret, and all those details which are required for my HTTP post function. Okay, and I also require this path which is v2 token. Fine. So for that, again, what I did was I have another data extension called API methods. Okay, I have a property called method name, and the value is request SFMC token. Fine. So from this particular row, it's going to fetch me all the details. Is basically the method URL and assign to this particular variable method URL. which is basically V2 token. Okay. So I'm doing a lookup order rows. Again, we're validating whether it has a valid row greater than 0 and assign this method URL. So whatever I need for my REST API, I have basically fetched this from the data extension and it's stored into a AMPscript variable. Now I need to define the payload. Okay. So the payload is a JSON payload, and the JSON payload is always in the e-value pair with double quotes. Okay. So this is how you're going to format your JSON payload. Okay. And the client ID that I've stored in the AMPscript variable, this is how I've assigned the client ID, client secret. This client type is always, I'm hard coding this because every time it never changes. Okay. Only the client ID and client secret changes based on your business unit or your install package configuration. Then what I'm doing is I'm using HTTP post to function. Okay. AMPscript function. I'm passing the endpoint. The endpoint I have concatenated with the authentication endpoint. This one when I did the first lookup order rows, and this one from the second lookup order rows. Okay. So I'm concatenating the authentication API endpoint and the method URL to make it in this format, which is this one. Fine. Then the content type, this is the content type application JSON. Okay. Payload, which we defined just now. True. Okay. Response and the call status. So this particular response is going to give me back the response for this particular HTTP post, when especially it is for the V2 token. Fine. So after this, I'm going to get back a JSON response from the server. So I'm using this particular response as a part of my JSON source for this build row set from JSON. Okay. And from there, I'm saying $.star. It means whatever I'm getting as a response, I want to parse everything. And then I want to basically do the row set. Okay. Go to every row and fetch that particular value. Because first remember, we are doing V2 token, and V2 token will have only one object inside that array. Okay. And if you want to see how it looks like, it's like I have discussed here. If you go to my blog, okay, let me show you where's my blog. So the first block, this build row set from JSON function, I have some analysis here as well. So basically, when we get the response, this is how our response will look like. Okay, so this is what the server sends back us as a response in a JSON format. So we have the access token type expires in. If you have any scope defined, the scope will be sent back. The SOAP endpoint and the REST endpoint, right? And when we are using this function, which is basically build row set from JSON, okay, the response that we are getting from Marketing Cloud would be more or less similar to this. Okay. So this is the header with value. If you see this, if you want to make this as a JSON payload, okay, and then you can format this. So this is how your JSON would might look like. This has to be in double quotes, obviously. Okay. So now this becomes your proper JSON. So this is what Marketing Cloud is returning, but right. But this is in the row set format. That's why you will find in this way. Okay. If you want to validate, Okay, let's copy this. Let's paste it here. Okay, and then I say what I've defined in my function is this $.star. Okay, let's $.star and let's go down. So you see this. Okay, so this is what is getting returned. This is because this is my evaluation result, by the way. Okay, this is the evaluation result. Now, what I did was I set a row variable and I said fetch me the first row. Okay, and from the first row, from the value, the first row is the access token, right? So here, how many rows I have? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's returning 6 rows. So from this here, what I said, from the first row, okay, the value is basically the access token, and the second row is basically the one type, right? So this is the token type, this is the token, fine. So, and the last line here I said concatenate the token type space access token. This is what we do, bearer token, right? So this is how I'm returning the access token. I hope you have understood this function, this code. Let me copy this code. Let's directly jump to Marketing Cloud instance. Okay. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create code resource, access token. Okay. I'm going to create a code resource of JSON type. Save. Paste the code. Fine. Save and publish and run this code. And you see, I'm getting the bearer access token. Okay. So thank you for listening and see you in some of the videos. Bye.